Hi friends, hope you guys are doing well with your studies and are following our previous lectures well. So friends, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel already, you should quickly go and do it right now. And also do click on the notification bell so that you do not miss any updates from our channel. So this is going to be the last lecture for the first chapter of the SEBA syllabus of history. That is, we are going to talk about consequences of Swadeshi movement in this particular lecture. ইয়াৰ আগৰ যিবিলাক লেকচাৰ হ'ল প্ৰায় 5-6টা মান লেকচাৰ অলৰেডি হৈ গ'ল য'ত আমি আৰম্ভণিৰ পৰা ফাৰ্ষ্ট চেপ্টাৰটো চালো য'ত আমি পাৰ্টিশ্যন অফ বেংগল চালো ৰিজন ফৰ পাৰ্টিশ্যন অফ বেংগল কনজিকুৱেন্সেছ এটচেট্ৰা আমি স্বদেশী মুভমেণ্টটো চালো স্বদেশী মুভমেণ্টৰ regions Swadeshi movement or story ebilak sai. Finally we have reached today at a point when we will be doing the consequences of Swadeshi movement. In the next lecture what we will do is that we will try to look at the question answers that are provided at the end of the SEBA textbook. That is the exercise section. We are not going to be able to dictate or make you write the answers of the questions. Ami ki koribo parim je moi tumalok olop kiba kibi tricks kiba kibi strategies hikai dibo parim je bilakor through di tumaloke answer bilak likhibo karone ba answer bilak prepare koribo karone tumalokor সুবিধা হ'ব ঠিক আছে one more thing is that if you guys watch this video and if you guys understand what I am teaching, if you guys like what I am teaching, so please go and click on the like button jitu enaka thumbs up symbol thake hetu click kori diba because that gives me an inspiration and that gives me a motivation to make even better videos, right? Because otherwise I see that there are some 400 500 or even 1000 views in the videos, but what I see is that likes are very less. So in that case মোৰ অলপ অসুবিধা হয় এটো বস্তু জানিবলে যে সেই ভিউজ বিলাক actually genuine হয় নে ফেক হয় actually আসলতে তোমালোকে সেই ভিডিও বিলাক চাই পেলাই তাৰ পৰা শিকিব পাৰিছা নে কোনবা ফেক ভিউৱাৰে সেই ভিউজ বিলাক মোৰ কাৰণে আনি আছে so that is very important for me as an educator as a teacher মোৰ কাৰণে খুব important সেই ফিডব্যাক প্ৰসেসটো আৰু মই জানাটো মোৰ কাৰণে খুব দৰকাৰী so if you in any chance অলপ মানুহ যদি তোমালোকে বুজি পোৱা তোমালোকৰ যদি ভাল লাগে ভিডিও বিলাক do press the like button, okay? And second thing is that আমাৰ যেটো অনলাইন লাইভ ক্লাছৰ কথা মই অলৰেডি কৈছো যেটো অলৰেডি আমাৰ এতিয়া চলি আছে সাইড বাই সাইড জুৰহাট বা ডিব্ৰুগড় আৰু গোৱালপাৰাৰ পৰা কিছুমান ষ্টুডেন্ট আমাৰ লগত অলৰেডি এছ'চিয়েট হৈছে তেওঁলোকৰ লগত আমি অনলাইন জুম ক্লাছ ফেস টু ফেস কৰি আছো যদি আৰু কোনোবাই any one of you are interested in knowing about that particular course, you can write to me at exambandhu@gmail.com exambandhu@gmail.com hetu description box aru he email id to etia likha thakibo, right? So this is it. Let's now quickly begin the chapter called consequences of partition of Bengal. So consequences of partition of Bengal ami formally lecture to ba slide presentation to start kora agote moi kisuman অলপ ফলো আপ কৰি দিব বিচাৰিছো লাষ্ট লেকচাৰ বিলাকৰ পৰা যাতে বুজিবৰ কাৰণে আমাৰ ইজি হয় আমি কি দেখিলো প্ৰিভিয়াস যেটো লেকচাৰ আছিল স্বদেশী মুভমেন্টৰ ওপৰত হেতুত আমি কি দেখিলো যে স্বদেশী মুভমেন্ট was an all encompassing movement, right? Almost every section of the Indian society got involved in this Swadeshi movement. We saw the involvement of women and women organizations. We also saw the involvement of students and student organization. We saw involvement of rich people, poor people, Hindu, Muslim, and everyone tried to, engage themselves with this Swadeshi movement. They were inspired by the leaders of Swadeshi movement and there was a mass participation in Swadeshi movement against the partition of Bengal. Aru ami tetia ki dekhilu, we saw the tools used by the leaders or the common public in Swadeshi movement. What we saw were that they were using things such as poems, newspapers, journals, magazines, theaters, or কিছুমান symbolic বস্তু ইউজ কৰিছিলে তেওঁলোকে ৰাখি বন্ধন ফৰ এক্সাম্পল আমি চাইছিলো হেবিলাক বস্তু ইউজ কৰিছিলে কমিউনিটি লাঞ্চ তেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ বস্তুবিলাক ইউজ কৰিছিলে এতিয়া আমি যেতিয়া consequence part to some when we look at the consequences of Swadeshi movement we will find that many of the things that we had learned in the tools section of the Swadeshi movement those will repeat themselves again in terms of consequences of Swadeshi movement. আমি দেখিম যে consequence actually কি হৈছে যে এটা rapid change হৈছে education system এটা change হৈছে ইন্ডিয়াৰ সেই সময় ঠিক আছে ইন্ডিয়াৰ লিটাৰেচাৰ এটা massive change হৈছে এটা ভাল ডেভেলপমেন্ট আহিছে লিটাৰেচাৰ বিলাক যিবিলাক নতুন নতুন আহিছে গান লিখা হৈছে নতুন নতুন থিয়েটাৰ নাটক কৰা হৈছে নতুন নতুন পোয়েট্ৰি লিখা হৈছে নতুন নতুন ছবি আঁকা হৈছে সেইবিলাকৰ ফলত কি হৈছে এটা ডেভেলপমেন্ট হৈছে লিটাৰেচাৰ ঠিক আছে তাৰ লগে লগে এটা চেঞ্জ আহিছে ইকোনমিক লেভেলত যেটো কথা মই কৈছিলো যে the Indian leaders were boycotting the foreign goods and promoting the indigenous goods তো তাৰ ফলত এটা ইন্ডাষ্ট্ৰি বা ইকোনমিৰ ওপৰত এটা চেঞ্জ আহিছে in addition to it political levelত চেঞ্জ আহিছে political levelত আমি দেখিছো women's participation students participation all caste all religion were participating to religion levelত তো political levelত definitely এটা চেঞ্জ আহিছে সো সেইবিলাক আমি সব স্টেপ বাই স্টেপ এই পাৰ্টিকুলাৰ ভিডিওটো চাবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিম So as I have already mentioned, we see that consequences of Swadeshi movement happened in the following levels, right? There were consequences on the at the literature level, because there were new journals and new newspapers coming up, new plays and theaters coming up, books coming up, songs coming up. So something called a national literature of India began to emerge itself, right? Earlier, prior to it, it was mostly British directed system of education, British directed system of literature, British directed system of way of life for the Indians also. But after the Swadeshi movement, what we see is that some of the changes appeared which provided a Indianness, a Indian feeling about things such as newspapers, journals, books, etc. So what we see is that broadly changes, so consequences of Swadeshi movement can broadly be seen at the political level, at the economic level, at the literary level, at the education level, and at the cultural level also. So at the literary level, we see new journals and magazines and newspapers coming up during Swadeshi movement. So in this particular point, when we are looking at the consequences in terms of journals and magazines that came up, the most important thing here is to remember the name of the editor and to remember the name of the journal or magazine. So a particular chapter to kind of trick, a particular point to kind of trick to বা strategy to এইটোৱে হৈছে যে আমি ইয়াত most importantly আমি মনত ৰাখিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিব লাগিব, we need to follow the name of the magazine or journal, and we also need to follow the name of the editor. এইটো কোনো ৰাত্তাবাজি কৰিবলৈ দৰকাৰ নাই, এইটো দুবাৰ তিনিবাৰ চাৰিবাৰ চাই দিয়াৰ পাছত এইটো বস্তু অট'মেটিক মনত থাকি যাব। যেতিয়া কুৱেশ্যন আনচাৰ্ছবিলাক কৰি দিবা তাৰপিছত অট'মেটিক এইটো মনত থাকি যাব। চ' চাম অফ দি ভেৰি পপুলাৰ most important which you cannot afford to ignore were the following, right? The Bengali was a journal. It was edited by Surendranath Banerjee. Sanjeevani, it was edited by Krishna Kumar Mitra. Sanjeevani we saw as the tool also. আমি যেতিয়া tool of Swadeshi movement চাইছিলোঁ, তেতিয়া আমি চাইছিলোঁ সঞ্জীৱনী যিখন জাৰ্নেল, সেই সঞ্জীৱনী জাৰ্নেলখনত এটা আৰ্টিকেল আহিছিলে around 1904 জুলাইত এটা আৰ্টিকেল আহিছিলে তাত, which was called বংগৰ সৰ্বনাশ বুলি এটা যিটো আৰ্টিকেল আহিছিলে দ্য বেংগলী সঞ্জীৱনী বোলা জাৰ্নেলখনত, কৃষ্ণ কুমাৰ মিত্ৰ এডিটেড। সেইখন এটা বহুত ডাঙৰ চেঞ্জ আনিছিলে স্বদেশী মুভমেণ্টৰ কাৰণে, ৰাইট? চ' we have seen this as a tool also. Then there was this journal called The Dawn by Satish Chandra Mukherjee. Suprabhat, which was a female magazine, it was edited by Kumudini Mishra. Then there was this one called Vande Mataram, it was edited by Aurobindo Ghosh. Then there was another important weekly called Yugantar. Questions have been asked on several occasions. বহুতবাৰ এই প্ৰশ্নটো সোধা হৈছে about Yugantar. So Yugantar was edited by Bhupendranath Dutta. You need to try to keep that in mind. I have not mentioned it on the slide because otherwise the text becomes very small if I try to mention all the names and all the names of the journals and editors. So এতিয়া টেক্সটবিলাক বহুত সৰু হৈ যায় আৰু চকুত নপৰে ভালকৈ। চ' গতিকে মই এইটো লিখি দিয়া নাই, এইটো পেজ নম্বৰ 10, page 10 of the NCERT of the SEBA textbook is very very essential for you. There is nothing much to understand in this particular point. You need to realize that in all the previous videos, in all the previous lectures that I have done with you, I was trying to explain things to you, I was trying to make you understand about things. But in this particular point, there is nothing much to understand. What was there to understand, I have already talked in the beginning of this video, and I have also talked it in the previous videos. It broad story asile, jitu kahini asile, যে কেনেকৈ এডুকেশ্যন লেভেলত চেঞ্জ হ'ল, কেনেকৈ লিটাৰেচাৰ লেভেলত চেঞ্জ হ'ল, পলিটিক্স লেভেলত চেঞ্জ হ'ল, সেইটো মই অলৰেডি তোমালোকক কৈ দিছোঁ মনত ৰাখিবৰ কাৰণে, তোমালোকৰ সুবিধা হ'বৰ কাৰণে। আই হেভ অলৰেডি এক্সপ্লেইনড ইট টু ইউ ইন দ্য ফৰ্ম অফ এ ষ্টৰি। হোৱাট আই এম ডুইং নাও ইজ দেট আই এম জাষ্ট ৰিপ্ৰডিউচিং হোৱাট ইজ ৰিটেন ইন দ্য টেক্সট বুক অফ ছেবা। চ' যদি তোমালোকে এই ভিডিঅ'টোৰ এই পৰ্টশ্যনখিনি ইয়াৰ পৰা নাচাই পেলাই তোমালোকে ডাইৰেক্ট তোমালোকৰ চেপ্টাৰটো পঢ়িবগৈ পাৰা গৈ পেলাই পেজ 10, আই এম স্পেচিফিকেলি মেনশ্যনিং ইউ that please go and read page 10 of the SEBA textbook provided by the Assam State Textbook Publication Board, right? So page 10, tate kisman important journal aru ase, dhara Yugantar by Bhupendranath Dutta. Then there was this magazine called Hitavadi. Then there was this magazine called Sandhya by Brahma Madhav Upadhyay, etc. So eblak bahut important, you should go and follow page number 10 very very seriously. In addition to it, some important plays or some important dramas were written. Theaters were very popular at that point of time. Some of the important plays were Palashir Prachitra by Kirot Prasad. It was Sirajuddaula and Mir Kasim by Girish Ghosh. Sabbas Bengali by Amritlal Bose. Bangar Angashet by Amarendranath Datta, etc. There are also some important books that came up at that point of time. books and songs that came up at that point of time. Some of the important books were Japani Bir by Swarna Kumari Devi, Joy Sangit by Pramod Natrai Chaudhary, Navya Bharat by Kartik Chandra Dasgupta, etc. And songs we already know, very wonderful songs were written by Rabindranath Tagore at that point of time, which we still continue to sing, or we recite, or we use them, we see them in our daily life even today. He wrote around 223 songs at that particular point of time. In that very short period of time, he wrote something around 23 number of songs. Amongst them, very popular were songs such as Ekla Cholo Re. Sorry, there is a mistake here. It should have been Ekla and it came as Elka. So Ekla Cholo Re is a very popular song which has been used in many Bollywood movies also recently. Then there was this song called Amar Sonar Bangla. This went on to become the national anthem of the independent nation state Bangladesh, which is still the national anthem of Bangladesh. It was written by Rabindranath Tagore. So this is an important point for GK also. You can keep it in mind. The national anthem of Bangladesh was also written by Rabindranath Tagore, and the national anthem of India was also written by Rabindranath Tagore. In addition to it, a national institution for promoting art and culture was established by Abanindranath Thakur. It was called Bangiya Kala Sanshad. The most important change or consequence that came up for Swadeshi movement was regarding national education. This is very, very important for your examination point of view also. So I am repeating it again and again. Do very, very clearly and very, very seriously follow page number 10 and 11 of the textbook provided by SEBA. So national education was a very important is a very important point. It is very essential for your examination point of view also. So here I will try to explain it a little bit and try to tell you a story about it. So we saw that partition of Bengal, there were movement, there were protests against partition of Bengal taking place already in Bengal in 1903, 4, 5 and 1906 also. So what we saw was that the student participation was increasing in this movement. Student যিবিলাক আছিলে, we saw that ৰিপন কলেজৰ যিবিলাক ষ্টুডেণ্ট আছিলে সেইবিলাকে লাহে লাহে তাহাঁতৰ পাৰ্টিচিপেশ্যনটো বঢ়াবলৈ ষ্টাৰ্ট কৰিছিলে অলৰেডি ফ্ৰম 1903-4 আৰু পাৰ্টিশ্যন অফ বেংগলটো অফিচিয়েলি ইমপ্লিমেণ্ট হোৱা আগৰ পৰাই. So as a result of it, to keep this in check and in anticipation and as a protection measure, what was done was that steps were taken by the British administration also. For example, the Chief Secretary of Bengal, Carlyle কি কৰিলে, he tried to issue a circular, a notice on 10th October 1905, demanding that students should not participate in politics and should not participate in boycott or any other all this stuff that was going on under Swadeshi movement. So এই নোটিছখন যেতিয়া পাছ কৰি দিলে কাৰ্লাইলে, তাৰপিছত দ্য প্ৰটেষ্টটো আৰু বেছি বাঢ়ি গ'ল. দেন ষ্টুডেণ্টছ ৱেৰ মটিভেটেড ডেট why will we not protest? This is our freedom of expression. We want to express that we are not liking the decision of partition Bengal. Why will we not oppose? Why will we not protest? Nana, you are saying us not to protest. No, this is not going to happen. We are now going to protest even more. So as a result of it, কি হ'ল যে লিডাৰবিলাকেও ষ্টুডেণ্টবিলাকক আৰু বেছিকৈ ইনস্পায়াৰ কৰিবলৈ আৰু বেছিকৈ পেট্ৰিয়টিক ফিলিংবিলাক তাহাঁতৰ ভিতৰত ভৰাবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিলে. এতিয়া ফৰ এক্সাম্পল সতীশ চন্দ্ৰ মুখাৰ্জী যোনে আছিলে, তেখেতে ক'লে যে কেলকাতা ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিৰ যিবিলাক ষ্টুডেণ্ট, কেলকাতা ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত যিবিলাক পঢ়ি আছে, কেলকাতা ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিখনক গোলাম খানা বুলি ক'লে, হাউচ অফ স্লেভছ বুলি ক'লে. কিয় ক'লে? বিকজ দি এডুকেশ্যন ছিষ্টেম ডেট ৱাজ ফ'ল'ড এট ডেট পইণ্ট অফ টাইম ৱাজ ট'টেলি ব্ৰিটিছ এডুকেশ্যন ছিষ্টেম. ব্ৰিটিছবিলাকে যেনেকৈ ধৰণে পঢ়াইছিলে, যি বস্তু পঢ়াইছিলে সেই বস্তুবিলাকে পঢ়া হৈছিলে আৰু সেই তেনেকেই পঢ়া হৈছিলে. গতিকে সতীশ চন্দ্ৰ মুখাৰ্জী claimed that all the students that are studying, all the what Calcutta University is doing is that it is creating slaves for the British government, for British administration. তো গোলাম খানা বুলি ক'লে. এইটোৰ পৰা বহুত ইম্পেক্ট পৰিলে ষ্টুডেণ্টবিলাকৰ মনত. ষ্টুডেণ্টবিলাকে বহুত ফিল কৰিলে বহুত যে আমি পেট্ৰিয়টিক হ'ব লাগে, আমি এইবিলাক বস্তু বয়কট কৰিব লাগে. দেন ডন বুলি যিখন জাৰ্নেলৰ কথা আমি অলৰেডি কৈছিলোঁ, সতীশ চন্দ্ৰ মুখাৰ্জীয়ে কথা, যিখন ডন মেগাজিনখন আমি আগৰ শ্লাইডটোত চাইছিলোঁ, সেই ডন মেগাজিনখনৰ লগতেই what he did was that he launched a Dawn Society also. He started giving lessons on patriotism to students all around Bengal and started promoting them, started urging them to take part in the Swadeshi movement. Then there was the participation of Rabindranath Tagore also. Under his leadership, the first Bongo Jatiya Vidyalaya was established on 6th August 1906. The second was established at Rangpur on 8th November 1906. So these things are mentioned on page 11 of the textbook provided by SEBA. So you should, I am telling it again, I am telling it repeatedly that you should very, very carefully follow page number 10, 11, 12, 13 of the SEBA textbook. In addition to it, there was a role of Rash Bihari Bose. Under his leadership, the National Education Council or the Jatiya Shiksha Parishad came up on 11 March 1906. So in total 600, total 62 secondary schools and total 3,000 primary schools were established at the national level in India during the Swadeshi movement. In addition to it, the Bengal National College was established on 15th August 1906, which subsequently was promoted to the National University in 12th December 1906. In the style of the National University, in the line of the National University, many other educational institutions such as the Bihar Vidyapith in Patna, the Samarth Vidyalaya in Maharashtra, and the Gujarat Vidyalaya in Gujarat at that time also came up. Then there was this Bengal Technical Institute established, which later came to be known as the Jadavpur University. Then what we saw was that the students were now rapidly and in large numbers boycotting the government schools, the British schools. They were boycotting the British schools and the British way of education and the British way of teaching, and they were promoting the indigenous system of education, the national education system, and they were thus developing a feeling of nationalism, a feeling of patriotism through these new changes, these consequences of the Swadeshi movement that were happening. So I'll repeat again, please follow page number 10 and 11 of the NCERT textbook. Sorry, not NCERT textbook, the SEBA textbook. So that was in the level of education, the consequences at the level of education. So let's now look at the consequences at the economic level, that is at the level of national industry. So let's first look at the background, because there are some things that are to be understood here, not just memorized or not just reproduction. There are some things to understand here also. Let us look at first the background. Background, we saw that in the Swadeshi movement as a tool, boycott of foreign goods was used, right? They were the leaders and the masses were boycotting foreign goods, and they were promoting the use of indigenous and homegrown goods, the goods that were produced locally in India, the Indian crafts, the Indian handloom, and all those things were promoted in a way, and foreign goods were to be boycotted. So it in a way resulted, had resulted in a desire and enthusiasm for self growth. Every Indian was in a way thinking that how can he use the goods that are available near him or at his disposal better, so that he does not need to depend on the foreign goods. How can he use the handloom to produce a shirt or a dhoti without being reliant on the British goods such as a shirt or a pant which he has to buy from the market? How can he rely on his domestic produces and use them for sugar or other things, and not rely on goods that were produced by British and that were sold by the British? So this in a way gave a scope for the rise of national industries. Several spinning machines were started to become popular at that time. Handlooms became very popular. They were already there, they were already popular, they were being used by people already in India, but at a mass level, so that many people can so that many lots of goods can be produced and many people can use those goods. These things started to be rapidly promoted and rapidly used. Almost every household started using a spinning machine, a handloom, and there were also some small and medium industries coming up. For example, industries for biscuits, confectionaries, bread, so that they do not need to depend on British bakers or British confectioners for biscuits, confectionaries, etc. Then small industries where you do not need very heavy plants and heavy machineries, such as for soap, for processing the mustard seeds to get mustard oil, and all those things. Small industries, small mills, and small industries were coming up amongst the people of India. So there was this one institution called Swadeshi Bhandar that was instituted, that was uh, established by Rabindranath Tagore. It was a textile farm. It was a homegrown. It was an indigenous textile farm, so that clothes can be produced for Indians to be used, and they do not need to depend on the British goods, British clothes. For example, the Manchester clothes were very popular. The clothes that were produced in Manchester were brought to India and sold among Indians, so that so that these things cannot be, need not be compulsorily used by Indians. They started promoting Swadeshi things. So this Swadeshi Bandar was established by Rabindranath Tagore. It was a textile farm. Then at the same time, national banks and insurance companies also came up. Previous lectures also I had talked that how the Indians had started to boycott the repayment of loans, and how they had boycotted the payment of taxes and all those things. So as a result of it, the rich Indians, the able group of Indians that were present at that time, they came together and they started forming indigenous banking organizations. I mean, 4 or 5 people come together with some money and they start lending to Indians only at the cheaper rates, and all those things came up. So national banks, national insurance companies came up. At the same time, now that goods were being produced at home and goods were being produced at small scale by people at home, so what happened is that there was a need, or there was a requirement for some retail shops, for some outlets to sell those goods that were being produced. So as a result of it, the Indian stores such as one called by Yogesh Chandra Chaudhary and Krishna Bihari Sen came up with ideas of Indian stores, right? There was one Lakhi Bhandar that was established, established by Sarala Devi, about whom we will learn even in greater details in the women's participation. Also, we will be learning about Sarala Devi Chaudhrani. So she established a retail shop called the Lakhi Bhandar, and there was this United Bengal stores that was established by Abdul Halim Ghaznavi. So in a way we see that there was changes happening at all levels. So প্ৰথমতে হৈছিলে যে কি সৰু ইণ্ডাষ্ট্ৰীবিলাক কৰি মানুহবিলাকে ঘৰতে বস্তুবিলাক বনাব ধৰিছিলে। এইটো ইণ্ডাষ্ট্ৰী বুলি আমি ক'ব নোৱাৰোঁ, বাট সৰু প্লান্ট, সৰু ইউনিটবিলাক বনাই ঘৰতে কাপোৰ বনোৱা কৰিছিলে, ঘৰতে বিস্কুট, চ'প, চাবোন তেনেকৈ বনোৱা কৰিছিলে। আৰু 2-4জন 5জন কেইটামান ঘৰ লগ লাগি অলপ কম্পাৰেটিভলি ডাঙৰ লেভেলত বনোৱা ষ্টাৰ্ট কৰিলে। আৰু তাৰ কাৰণে কি হ'ল, সেইবিলাক চেল কৰিবৰ কাৰণে, সেইবিলাক বিক্ৰী কৰিবৰ কাৰণে দোকানৰ প্ৰয়োজন হ'ল। চ' গতিকে ইণ্ডিয়ানছবিলাকেই আগবাঢ়ি আহি পেলাই ইণ্ডিজিনাছ প্ৰডাক্টবিলাক চেল কৰিবৰ কাৰণে দোকানবিলাকো খুলিলে। এট দ্য চেম টাইম বেংকৰ দৰকাৰ হ'ল, পইচা ধাৰৰ দৰকাৰ হ'ল, চ' বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ বস্তু দৰকাৰ হ'ল। চ' এট দ্য চেম টাইম নেশ্যনেল বেংকছ আৰু নেশ্যনেল ইঞ্চুৰেঞ্চ কোম্পানীজো আহিবলৈ ষ্টাৰ্ট হ'ল। তাৰপিছত কি হ'ল যে নট অনলি স্মল এণ্ড মিডিয়াম ইণ্ডাষ্ট্ৰিজ, লাহে কিছুমান ইণ্ডিয়ানছ, চাম ইনফ্লুৱেঞ্চিয়েল এণ্ড চাম ৰিচ ইণ্ডিয়ানছ, হোৱাট দে ডিড was that they started establishing some large industries also. A very relevant person at that time was Jamshedji Tata, and we all know about Tata company till today. Tata company is still doing still reigning in one of the Indian industries across the globe. So the Jamshedji Tata established an iron factory in 1907 at Jamshedpur. Then there was this Bengal Lakshmi cement that was Bengal Lakshmi cotton mill that was organized, that was established by Neil Ratan Sarkar on August 1, 1906. Then there was Bengal Chemicals that was established by Acharya Prafulla Ray, July 25, 1906. These names are very relevant. You need to focus on them, put a star mark on them. These questions are very often asked in your examinations. The awakening that started in Bengal, that I have already said, that a movement to it went outside of Bengal also. It was not only confined in Bengal. So the first Indian Industrial Summit was held in Varanasi in December 17, 1905 under the chairmanship of R.C. Datta. This, in a way, all those things, the Swadeshi movement does led to a rapid growth of Indian national industries. It led to the rise in self-respect and self-reliance of the Indians. They started realizing that no, we do not necessarily need to depend on British goods and British factories and British industries. We are capable enough, we are good enough to produce things for our own consumption at our small levels, at our medium levels also. Then there arise a lot of employment opportunities, and those people who were not able to start industries, or those people who were not able to start up factories or units of production, they started getting employment in the units and establishments of other people which they were forming. And this in a way does resulted in rise of employment opportunities for Indians, and it also led to the revival of earlier or old industries that were getting dormant due to the massive overflooding of British and foreign goods. Then we can separately look at the women's participation in the Swadeshi movement. I have already been talking about the women's participation in Swadeshi movement. The participation of women has been a very relevant very relevant thing, very relevant issue in Swadeshi movement. We have seen this for the in 1905, 4, 5, 6, we saw it for the first time that women in large numbers participated in the national movement. So the middle class urban women, we cannot say that all women, there was differences amongst women also. The rural or less educated women could not take part as much as the urban and middle class women could participate at that time. So it was widely participated by urban middle class women at that time. Two women at that time were very famous. They were Sarala Devi Chaudhrani and Sister Nivedita. These two women are very, you can put as many very you want, before saying that they were relevant. They are relevant for your examination point of view, so they are very very relevant for examination point of view. Pratham guraki hoise Sarla Devi Chaudharani. She was born on 9 September 1872 and she died on 18th August 1945. So these questions might be asked as a short note in your examination, so you should keep in mind this particular slide and the next slide also. So she was a niece of Rabindranath Tagore. তেখেত ভাগিনীয়েক আছিলে Rabindranath Tagore তেখেতৰ মোমায়েক আছিলে. She brought in some revolutionary ideas into the Swadeshi movement. She started uniting people, or mostly the youth. She started uniting the youth through some festivals and some gatherings, for example, such as Virastami Vrat, Pratapaditya Utsav, Udayaditya Utsav. These kind of events she organized so that people can be united, people can be brought together, and she can talk to them about ideas of patriotism and about ideas of nationalism. So she also focused on increasing or promoting the physical strength or physical health of the youth. She also wanted that they should have some ability in martial tactics also. So she started this institution called Vyayam Samitis, where she would call the youths to come together and she would teach them yoga, and she would teach them to use some basic weapons like as lathis and all, not in an attempt to attack others or to cause a ruckus or cause violence everywhere, but just as a means of self defense and as a means to keep yourself fit and physically capable to participate in a movement of this large scale. So she also focused on promoting physical health. Then she was editing a magazine called Bharati to promote the youth and to spread the idea of patriotism amongst them. Later she also became the first woman to organize to establish the first women's organization in India, which came to be known as the Bharat Stri Mahamandal, which was established in 1910. We have already seen in the previous slides that she established the store outlet and a retail outlet to sell the indigenous or Swadeshi goods, which was called Lakhi Bhandar, which was established at the Cornwallis Street in Calcutta. It is now probably known as the Bidhan Sarani in Calcutta. In addition to it, there was Sister Nivedita. You need to know about Sister Nivedita also. This can also be asked as a short note in your examination. She was born on 20th October 1867 and she died on 13th October 1911. She was originally from Ireland and was born by the name Margaret Elizabeth Noble. She was a very very staunch follower and a very loyal disciple of Swami Vivekananda, and he only had named him Sister Nivedita. So earlier her name was Margaret Elizabeth, and after meeting Swamiji is becoming a follower and disciple of Swamiji named her as Nivedita. So she was in a way a face for women's education at that point of time. She started a girls' college in Bagbazar in Kolkata in 1898. She was actively participating in Young Men's Hindu Union, Vivekananda Society, Dawn Society, Anushilhan Samiti, and others. So altogether, she had a very great participation. She provided a very great participation in the Swadeshi movement and served a great role in promoting the education of women in India at that time. So she had a very great impact, and she was also to a great extent successful in doing what she was wanting to do. So see her role, her attempt led to rise in self-confidence and education amongst many of the women in the urban centers of India at that particular time. So she also was, she in a way was a example, a replica of the entire strength or force of the Indian women at that time. So the Daily Telegraph newspaper, which was published from London on 11 October 1907, in fact claimed that the Bengal women are the most obstinate and the most dangerous antagonists of the English. So if we now look at the political level, how things, what were the consequences at the political level, we see that there was a huge awakening at the political level among the people. More and more need was felt among the people now that they need to be united and that they need to be led well by a particular organization or by some particular leaders, so that they can put together a collective and a united fight against the British government. But what we also see at the political level was that an unpreventable Hindu-Muslim gap was fast, developing in India. The policies, the strategies of partition of Bengal that the British government had taken, Indian leaders tried their best to avoid this Hindu-Muslim divide. We have seen in the previous lectures how they tried to use some symbolic tools such as Rakhi Bandhan or community lunch and other things to avoid this particular Hindu-Muslim gap, but they could not do it. This finally became very real, that the Hindu-Muslim gap become very real in India at that time. These the viceroy at that time, Lord Curzon, and the other officials at that time, to a great extent, misled the Muslims and also a particular section of the Hindu moderates, and more and more they tried to divide the people and rule them for a longer time. So as a result of it, what happened was that the Muslim community, the some of the leaders of the Muslim community, not the entire Muslim community, some of the leaders which were mostly situated in East Bengal and who were expecting to be profited, to be benefited by this particular partition of Bengal, started realizing or started bringing forward their demands regarding the Muslims, and this led to a similar deputation of October 1, 1906, and finally it led to the formation of the Muslim League in December 1906. So let's look at the formation of Muslim League, because if we look at the political consequences of Swadeshi movement, a very important aspect was the formation of the All India Muslim League, and this was going to change the politics and the entire history of India's national movement henceforth, which would continue till 1947, which led to the partition of Pakistan from India. So the background was that the aim of partition Bengal, we already saw, was to divide and rule. Curzon and others were already misleading the Muslims to gain their support. So Lord Curzon, who was the viceroy at that time, he made a trip in 1904, February 1904, to the Muslim dominated areas to garner support from them and to inspire them to support the British government with the decision of partition of Bengal. So on 18 February 1904, Lord Curzon went to Dhaka and he organized a huge rally, so that he could unite the Muslims against the Hindus. So one thing you need to keep in mind, that all these things were happening in the expected Eastern Bengal province. The support was obviously to be coming from Eastern Bengal part and not from the Western Bengal part. So he was traveling extensively in the Eastern Bengal part and was misleading the influential Muslim leaders that were at that time in Eastern Bengal. So he was helped by, or in other sense, he helped the Nawab of Dhaka named Nawab Khwaja Salimullah at that time. So he lent the Nawab some 14 lakh rupees with a very minimum interest, so that the Nawab could use that money to unite the people against the Hindus and to support the British government in the partition of Bengal. So special promises were made to the Muslim landlords and the Muslim large and the huge Muslim farmers, big Muslim farmers. The promises were made to Muslim landlords and big Muslim farmers. Lord Minto succeeded Lord Curzon, and he also continued the same promises to Muslims. He also made an official declaration of rules of administrative reforms to impress the Muslims, wherein he said that we will bring changes and administrative changes and reforms that will help to the Muslims in the long term. So inspired by all these things, all this support that was promised by the British viceroys themselves, what happened was that a particular section of the Muslim leaders became very inspired and became very interested. They thought that their demands can now be fulfilled through the British government, because the British government is ready to support their demands and their requirements. So they formed a committee to discuss and bargain the new demands which they were supposed to propose in relation to the new reforms that the British government had promised. So what they did was that they thought of demanding for a separate electorate for the Muslims under the new reforms. On October 1, 1906, a group of 35 Muslim leaders, which was led by Aga Khan, a popular Muslim leader at that time, they went to Simla to submit their demands to Lord Minto. The viceroy at that time used to stay in Simla during the summer months. So the viceroy house used to be in Simla. So this particular deputation was popularly known as Simla deputation. I have mentioned it in red letters because this was very relevant point. This was a very relevant point in Indian history, the history of Indian national movement. So as they submitted their demand, the viceroy Lord Minto at once immediately agreed that their promises will be considered, and all of them returned happily to their respective places. Then on December 13, 1906, at Dhaka, under the leadership of Nawab Salimullah, another meeting, a very historic session was organized, in which they formally or officially declared the formation of the All India Muslim League. And thus this was a very very historic moment, and the entire national movement was going to change from this particular point in time. And this was going to continue till India's independence and partition of the subcontinent. So Nawab Salimullah in that meeting declared the aims of the Muslim League, the proposed aims and objectives of the Muslim League. Why he was justifying why there was a need for something called All India Muslim League. So he said that it was meant to increase the sense of loyalty of the Muslims towards the British, and at the same time it was also to keep the British government or the British administration aware about the genuine needs and the genuine demands of the Muslims, which were very very real and which it can be communicated from time to time with the help of the All India Muslim League. Plus, it also aimed at creating a sense of unity and brotherhood and togetherness amongst all the Muslims. So, Lord Viceroy, Viceroy at that time, Lord Minto, and the Secretary of State for India in London, Lord Morley, expressed their great satisfaction in the activities of the All India Muslim League, and they promised the full support to the All India Muslim League. So, you can see at every step the British government was trying to divide the Indian people and was trying to rule them even for a longer period of time and rule them even more efficiently. So British intelligently made use of this gap, this divide that was emerging between Hindus and Muslims. So they passed this very legendary or very historic act called the Morley Minto reforms in 1909. Under this reform, what they did was that they accepted the demand of separate electorates for Muslims. And please remember, this was a very very historic moment in India's national movement. And after from this point of time, there was no going back to the earlier pure Hindu Muslim brotherhood or Hindu Muslim unity, or those ideas were going to be dead forever from this point in time. And forever and ever the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League was to be pitted against each other by the British government to serve their own interest and to serve their own aims of ruling over India for a longer and longer period. So now if we look at some of the consequences that occurred to the Indian National Congress due to the Swadeshi movement, we find that the Indian National Congress was very very relevant force at that point, because it was a very major party. There were smaller parties also, there were smaller organizations and smaller associations also, but Indian National Congress at that time was a very major party because it had a very wide reach across entire India. So they were in a way promoting or holding up this idea of national unity by means of a single party that was to represent the demands and causes of all the people of India. So for Swadeshi movement in the initial phases, as I have already said, they were using techniques such as petitions, signature campaigns, applications, etc., etc. And we have already seen that all those things did not work at all. So they had to use some newer techniques, some extreme techniques such as boycotting foreign goods, boycotting political institutions, by boycotting British administration, etc., and British education system, etc. So what we see is that a kind of a split occurred amongst the Congress itself. The moderates who were supporting the passive movements such as applications, signature campaigns, etc., and the extremists who were supporting harsh or even more active approaches such as boycotting everything related to British goods and expanding this boycott to the entire country and entire and all spheres of society. But even that and what happened was that the Congress started realizing the weakness in their earlier methods, and they realized that those passive things that they were applying were not going to serve their purpose, and British is not going to respond to their demands. Even though there was a divide in the Congress, but the struggle continued. They continued their part and they continued the struggle, and the Indian National Congress kept playing an important role in the Swadeshi movement. Now, as a response to all of these, if we look at the attempts that were made by the British governments to suppress or to stop the Swadeshi movement, we find a very important, very relevant, very interesting approach called, which can be called as the carrot and the stick approach. Carrot and the stick, because on the one hand they were providing the Indian sweet, the carrot, the sweetness, a good thing, a reward, and at the same time they were also treating them with stick. They were also treating them harshly and were imposing harsh measures on them. So if we look at the carrot and stick approach, what what were the things that were done under a, what were the things that can be called a carrot and stick approach. We see that gifts and offers were made to the moderates and supporters of the British or the British decisions, and at the same time some harsh measures were made for those who did not support British and those who were on the other side of the moderates. So thus we see that there was carrot for those who helped, those who were beneficial for British, and there was stick for those who were opposing the British. For the moderates or for the Muslims, what they did was that they introduced several titles, several awards, recognitions, etc. They made several important appointments. For example, many judges of the High Court at during those times were appointed from amongst the moderate Indians who did not very staunchly oppose the British proposal of partition of Bengal. They at the same time made several fancy promises, very good promises to the Muslims, specifically, most importantly to the Muslims. They made very good promises, very big promises, and also to the moderate factions of the Indian National Congress and the moderate factions of the Hindus. Also, they promised several good things that were to come up after the partition of Bengal. They made some fake reforms such as the parliamentary reforms. It was a reform just for the name, but it was not that much a reform as much as it was a strategy to divide and rule the Indians. So it, at all the stages, we find the British government using their divide and rule policy. On the one hand, they were dividing the Hindus and the Muslims, by promising the Muslims that there will be good things in this new province and this will be a Muslim dominated province. And at the same time, they were also applying the divide and rule approach amongst the Hindus also and amongst the Congress also, by saying that moderates should come with us and we will give good things to the moderates. And tried to punish or tried to repress the extremists at the same time. So if we now look at the very very final end point of the Swadeshi movement, what were the contributions, overall or broad contributions of the Swadeshi movement, we find that this in a way provided the realization about the strength of unity and mass movements to Indians. The Indians realized the strength of unity. They realized that united we stand and divided we fall. Then there was this self-realization for the Indian National Congress also. As I have already said, the Indian National Congress had realized that their earlier methods, that their earlier passive methods of requesting and sending applications was not going to work henceforth, and they also realized that they now need to change their methods and techniques of struggle. An important event was that it was the beginning of the industrial development of India. The indigenous industries, as they came up, they led to the industrial development of India and the industrial self-reliance of the Indians. So the Indians got the idea and sense of Swaraj through Swadeshi. They realized that they can rule themselves also at some point. They can also rule themselves by themselves. They do not need to depend on the British as they do not need to depend on the British for the British goods and British services. They at the same time also do not need to depend on the British for administration or for ruling on them. So this Swadeshi movement was very very important in laying the initial seeds of the demand for Swaraj at a greater level in the coming time. This also led to the empowerment of women considerably. We cannot say that every woman or every section of women were empowered by the Swadeshi movement, but a considerable amount, but a good amount of good section of urban women that were staying in cities and those that had good influential family background, they were greatly empowered. They started getting good education and they started leading the movement from the front, and in a way started percolating or sipping down the effects of education to other sections of women and other women of India also. So also we see that because of the failure of the initial movements or passive resistance tools of the Congress and the Indian leaders, what we see is that there was a simultaneous rise of an extremist phase of extremist faction of nationalist leaders, and also subsequently this led to armed resistance movements against the British government. So we see that overall there was a boost in self-respect and a belief in the self had emerged at the end of the Swadeshi movement. The Indians started believing themselves, started believing the strength of unity and strength of mass movements. Finally, after continuing till 1911, it was seen that finally the British government was forced, or the British government was compelled to repeal the decision of partition of Bengal in 1911, and it was at the end a success for the Indians and the Indian nationalist leaders. It gave a very strong message to Indians and also the British government also, that this is not going to be simple to rule the Indians in the coming years. So this is it. This is the end of the first chapter of the SEBA history part of your syllabus. It was very wonderful conducting the lectures with all of you. I repeat, if you have not subscribed to this YouTube channel already, please subscribe the YouTube channel and also do turn on the notifications. In the next lecture, what we will do is that we will look at the question and answers that are provided at the end of the exercise of the SEBA textbook. So thank you so much. Bye bye.